My adoration for Star Wars knows no bounds, and I love Ahsoka Tano like she was my favorite child. And when I heard she was coming out of the cartoon world and into the live action one of The Mandalorian, I was elated. I almost came. And when I heard Rosario Dawson might be playing her, I was like, a good Afro-Latina actress playing one of the most beloved characters in all of Star Wars, you know, insert that Tyler the Creator meme right here. But as news rolled out, I saw an article floating around Twitter. Rosario Dawson and her family sued over alleged transphobic assault. And immediately, I had a sinking feeling. And after reading it, obviously something wasn't sitting well within me. So I did what any sane person does nowadays. For 2 weeks, I researched the entire case and Rosario Dawson's history with the LGBT community before forming an educated opinion, instead of tweeting about something I know nothing about. We all do that, right? But it seems a lot of people have come to the conclusion that Rosario Dawson should not be able to play Ahsoka Tano because of these allegations. So I wanted to take a look at the situation with you guys, the entire situation, and come up with a conclusion together. So follow me into the magical world of civil lawsuits. So what exactly is Rosario Dawson being accused of? The lawsuit states in late 2017, Rosario Dawson and her family invited their longtime handyman Dedrick Finley to come out to Los Angeles, California to do construction work for Rosario. Finley would live in a rent-free apartment paid for by the Dawson family, and would, in turn, do renovations for Rosario's residence. According to the lawsuit, for 2 decades up until this time, the Dawson family knew Finley as a lesbian. In December 2017, Dedrick Finley decided to come out to the Dawson family, where he, quote, unequivocally and unambiguously told them his pronouns were he, him, his, and that they should refer to him as Dedrick going forward, not Deirdre, end quote. The suit goes on to say, and I quote, immediately after Mr. Finley coming out as transgender, the family misgendered him multiple times each day with deliberate indifference, end quote. Finley says Rosario was in the room for some of these times that her mother and stepfather would misgender him, and the actress would say nothing about it. He says he brought this up to Rosario, and from his point of view, nothing was done about the misgendering as it kept persisting. You're a grown woman, he says Rosario told him. In February 2018, the lawsuit states that Isabel, Rosario's mom, sent Finley a text message saying that they wanted him out of the apartment by May. Finley claimed that the text was an improper eviction notice and continued to stay there. At the end of April 2018, Rosario and her mother went to the apartment. The Out article, for which Finley did an interview about the situation, says, Isabel and Rosario showed up at the apartment to discuss ending the lease, but soon after, Finley asked if they do so at another time. Isabel allegedly threatened to kill him and his cat and attacked Finley after he said he'd call the police. The lawsuit states, and I quote, once Mr. Finley was laying helpless on the ground outside, Isabel, who is substantially larger than Mr. Finley, got on top of Mr. Finley's body and began punching him, end quote. And Isabel allegedly said, "You're not so much of a man now," for which Rosario responded, "Mom, stop being petty." According to the lawsuit, and I quote, initially because of Rosario's exclamation, Mr. Finley believed that Rosario was going to pull Isabel off of him. However, Rosario, aiding and abetting Isabel's wrongful behavior, sat down on top of Mr. Finley, actively restraining him while he was on the ground to ensure that her mother could continue battering him, end quote. During the attack, Finley said that Rosario and her mother stole his phone. Different accounts say that this was to stop him from calling the police, or because there was video on it of Isabel misgendering him. After the attack, Finley sought and was granted a restraining order against Isabel, but the restraining order was subsequently dropped as it was not prosecuted in court. Rosario Dawson's lawyer released a statement, quote, "The Dawson family is saddened and disappointed by these false, baseless allegations. We look forward to addressing the plaintiff's claims in court." End quote. And as of right now, there has been no update on this case. This is what we know about the case. Let's analyze this from the beginning. Finley came out as a trans man and was misgendered. Mostly, it's reported by Rosario's mother and stepfather. Now, Rosario isn't responsible for her family's actions. There's an ancient proverb that says, "It's one's own fault when one is a dick." So we need to look at Rosario's actions and Rosario's actions alone. And in this instance, she would be in the wrong if she said, "You are a grown woman," because Finley does not identify as such anymore. So let's look at this from Finley's perspective. From my understanding, it is a very taxing and stressful process for someone to transition. And when a transgender person finally feels like their full selves, they want to be identified as such. So when someone uses their dead name or uses the wrong pronouns, it's as if people don't see them as they see themselves, which would honestly hurt anyone. Now let's look at it from Rosario's point of view. There are two different scenarios I can think of that those words would come out of her mouth. One possibility is that she said them in a way that Finley believed it happened. It is possible that she said those words to intentionally misgender someone, intentionally causing them harm. Another possibility could be that she's known this person for 20 years as one thing, and as the lawsuit specifically states, wasn't immediately able to switch over to something else. I'm going to be honest with you, that's something I struggle with as well. There's a cis straight guy that I work with whose name is not Seth, but my brain continually calls him that. It's been 2 years, and no matter how many times I'm told his name is whatever it is, I can't seem to remember it. It's not an excuse, but it is how some people's minds work. And if you know something for 20 years, it's hard to immediately start thinking something else. So there are different degrees of difficulties for both parties involved. Regardless of if it was on purpose or not, Finley was still hurt by this. And if you did care about someone, you would work to call them what they wanted to be called. Do I not give a fuck about Seth? He must be a bitch. But on another level, is misgendering a tort or an infringement on rights in the state of California? No. I trust the back of Snapple caps more than I trust this. From what I've researched, no, misgendering is not a crime, tort, or misdemeanor for the general population of California. That Bill Fox is referring to is for senior citizens in long-term care facilities, to prevent discrimination against them. It's a case of ignorance at best. Now, that's just 3 perspectives to look at this from. And I'm not saying one is right. I'm just saying that in an important situation like this, it's imperative to look at all sides of the story. And it might seem like I'm just trying to poke holes in Finley's story, but that's not it at all. It's just the only version that we have to even analyze. And people are believing it wholeheartedly, without even trying to actually look at the entire picture. So we have to look at the facts, and the fact of the matter is, there just aren't a lot of facts. And I mean facts by the actual definition of the word, because we like to be lackadaisical with the meaning of that word these days. Not alternative facts, not stories. Facts are things proven to be true, meaning that they need concrete evidence behind them. And the only fact we do have that isn't circumstantial, meaning isn't just a recant of the story from one party's point of view, is that there was an emergency restraining order granted to Finley. This brings us to the second part of the accusation, the alleged assault. Now, if this did occur, it is a horrible crime. No one, whether trans or otherwise, deserves to be harmed in any way. And with the police issuing a temporary emergency restraining order, means there was an altercation of some sort that the police felt was enough to give Finley protection from. But, and this is very important, the restraining order was not against Rosario Dawson. And if Rosario Dawson was supposedly a part of this alleged assault, why wasn't the restraining order placed against her as well? The police only felt it necessary to grant a restraining order against Rosario's mother, Isabel Dawson, and said restraining order was subsequently dropped because Finley didn't bring it to court. Out of all those words in all of those articles, we got one fact. That isn't even about Rosario. The rest of the case that has been reported on, up until now, is the circumstantial one side of this story. We should hear Rosario's side of the story before we come to any conclusion, but unfortunately we don't have that. But because she is a public figure, we do have Rosario's actions to judge. The earliest thing I could find of her relationship with the LGBT community is her activism back in the early 2000s. Rosario worked pro bono, meeting for free, in the PFLAG grassroots campaign, Stay Close. The campaign encourages families and friends to stay close to the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people in their lives. And if people don't have a support system, they can find one in the PFLAG organization. This article from March 2011 in The Village Voice writes about her transgender friend Chloe DeBilo, and how Rosario spoke at her funeral when Chloe died from suicide earlier that year. Rosario talked about how they had been friends since she was a kid, and told an anecdote about how while Chloe was transitioning, she was very uncomfortable about being catcalled. And Rosario taught her some cheeky Spanish to reject the unwanted men's attention. In May of 2018, GLSEN, the education organization responsible for working to end discrimination, harassment, and bullying based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and to prompt LGBT cultural inclusion and awareness in kindergarten through grade 12 schools, awarded Rosario Dawson the Inspiration Award at GLSEN's Respect Awards for her activism all these years. In 2018, Rosario Dawson did an interview with Laverne Cox and right out the gate talked about their mutual friend Chloe.
And we talked about a dear mutual friend of ours. Do you remember Chloe?
But I just she was such a fierce warrior woman. She was part of this awesome punk group called the Trans Sisters. She was just like this, she worked really hard on trans rights around housing, and especially around healthcare. Understanding the abuse and the molestation and all types of things that she would get when she would go in for care and how she was treated. And I think of her often, and when I saw you, that was one of the things that just really touched me, because it was like, it makes me so sad she's not here in this moment to see how you're shining. Because I just really love you, and I think it's just really powerful and really beautiful what you're doing around trans visibility and just fierceness in general, because it's not just about talking about the marginalization in housing and healthcare and all that kind of stuff, but it's also about just going, the fierceness that we are missing in our society and our culture by not shining a light on every single part of us.
The list keeps going. Now, all this isn't evidence for the particular crime in question, and I understand that people can be acting for the cameras, and behind closed doors, they are literal monsters. But 30 years is a long time to be, 1, doing something that you don't believe in, and 2, doing something that you're not gaining anything from. We know that 100% an altercation occurred because the police issued Finley a restraining order against Rosario's mom and not Rosario. And now that we have collected all the information that we possibly can, now would be the time to form an opinion. Let's circle back to the original question of this video. Should Rosario Dawson be able to play Ahsoka Tano based on these allegations of transphobia? There is very little concrete evidence. Most of what we do have is circumstantial, and as of right now, Rosario Dawson has not been convicted of a crime. This is not grounds for someone to lose their livelihood over. And so stop passing around this article like it's your fucking mixtape, because no one should buy it. Now let's venture into hypothetical land. What happens if this case turns out in Finley's favor, and Rosario is convicted of a hate crime? At that point, it's up to Disney and individual companies to decide who they would like to hire. Personally, I wouldn't hire someone who is transphobic, and having activism here to let companies know that would be a positive influence on society. But thinking about the Disney company, who is attempting to take over the world with the best played game of Monopoly I have ever seen, oh boy! It's not in their nature to mess with who they hire. I'm sure they know more about the situation than we do. And she was hired for like 5 different shows anyway. Hypothetical question number 2 for you. What if she's convicted, but not of a hate crime? It was just assault on a person who happened to be of a marginalized group, and the court didn't think she acted in a hateful way, they just got into an altercation. Should those convicted of crimes who have paid their dues not be able to get jobs based on something that happened in their past? Say the lawsuit against Dawson goes through, and because it's civil court, she pays her fine, tries to move on with her life, better herself, and grow from the situation. Is she still not allowed to have the job? I thought the whole point of this was to hold real bigots and predators accountable for their actions, and hopefully get them to self-reflect and change in their ways. Hypothetical question number 3. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, because the jury is literally still out on this case, but what if it turns out that Rosario herself didn't commit a crime at all? What happens if the court rules in Rosario's favor? To those who have been passing around misinformation, what are y'all gonna do? And the correct answer to that question is not, I'll take back what I said, because the damage has already been done at that point. You aided in harassing someone to the point that they are now labeled all over the internet as something they're not. People will go on believing this false thing about a person because you didn't stop to think that your words do matter. And it might seem like I'm standing Rosario Dawson. I'm not. I understand where this culture of canceling people and the Me Too movement has come from. I myself was raped in high school, and I did not come forward because I did not think anyone would believe me. There is a real stigma out there when it comes to victims. We have a tendency to shame them when they come forward with their stories. which is not only degrading to them, but it's a detriment to the growth of our justice system and, as a larger extent, the growth of our society. But the counter shouldn't be, believe all victims no matter what. The counter should be, listen to victims and let them have a voice. Listen to their stories and let them have a fair day in court. And revise our justice system to reflect the strides we've made in our culture. We are not the justice system, no matter how much we want to be Mariska Haggerty. Cancel culture is just not productive. Look how many times we've canceled Kanye West, and that nigga is still out there doing stupid shit. It does nothing to solve homophobia, racism, or sexism. All it does is try to control-alt-delete bigotry, and that's not the way life works. People still exist after these crusades, and thus that bigotry still exists along with them. So cancel culture is basically the flesh-colored band-aid of activism. It does nothing to heal the situation, and mostly just helps white people. Things are rarely black and white, especially things like bigotry. They usually stem deeper than what we see on the surface, and it takes more than a few seconds to comprehend and to fix these things. Is Rosario Dawson innocent or guilty? I have no idea. And frankly, neither do you. And that is the point. We're messing with real people's lives here, and I feel like decisions about these things can't be snapped. But I know that the article that's being passed around doesn't have all the information in it. And when you pick and choose the parts of the story that fit your narrative, then you're just as intellectually dishonest as someone who is racist or homo or transphobic. And when the mob mentality strikes and takes out another person, you're not a hero of social justice. You're just kind of a jerk. And not even the fun kind like me. We need to be better, be patient, do research so we can understand and make educated opinions and arguments. We need to be smarter. And above all else, don't be a dick.